So why don't I tell you about my company since you probably don't know that much about it, yeah?
Yeah. Can you just introduce yourself first? Yeah, sorry.
Okay. My name is Jessica Chalmers. I'm the Vice President of Marketing and Business Development for Macro Oceans, a company in Sacramento, California.
Mhm. So can you tell me a little bit about what your company does?
Yes. My company is a company that biorefines seaweed.
Oh.
And what does biorefining mean? It means that the seaweed gets this, we take in seaweed and we separate it into different parts,
Hmm.
like chemical parts. So it's not like we just chop it up and separate it into parts, but we put it through an engineering process and it ends up having, it comes out in different ways. And those streams that come out of the factory are for different products.
Hmm.
So and just to be clear, we're a startup. We're not at the stage where we're producing anything big.
Hmm.
We're producing at a very small level at, I'd say, pilot scale, if that means anything to you. So there's three scales: benchtop, pilot, and then industrial scale. So small, bigger, biggest. And we're I'd say at somewhere between lab scale and pilot scale for our cosmetic product. So I said that biorefining separates a seaweed into parts, and those parts become different streams. So the streams that we're looking at are beauty, food, and coatings, packaging coatings. And that's probably the packaging coatings are the most interesting to what you're talking about because it's the packaging coatings that are going to serve a climate purpose. So we hope to use seaweed to replace the kind of plastic that's in, for example, in a coffee cup, or some kind of cups that you have. There's coating inside, and you think you're in Starbucks and you think, oh, I'm gonna recycle this, right?
Hmm.
But in fact, the coating makes it unrecyclable. And all of those get into the waste stream. And the chemicals that are on the cups and so much more get put into the waste stream. Have you heard of PFAS?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's what's like painted on into the cups. That's part of the plastic. I'm calling it plastic, but what I mean really is synthetic. It's a synthetic that has PFAS in it. The PFAS is used. I mean, it's very handy, like all plastics. Plastics have been a miracle because they do so much. And so the PFAS in like paper cups, it makes it so that the water doesn't like make the cup itself all soggy,
Mhm.
and the oil doesn't get into it either. So so you have to have something, if you can imagine a world in which there was nothing to protect the paper from like the liquid that was in the cup, we'd be in trouble because it would turn to mush in your hand. So PFAS is like a miracle because it does that. But then we've discovered since for the past, however many years, we've discovered that PFAS is also toxic for our bodies. So we're trying to replace that with part of the seaweed.
So at least at a small scale, ha have you found that the seaweed compound that works just as well as PFAS?
We found it, yeah, but then scaling up is always the next jump.
So in the scaling, what has been like some of the biggest technical or market challenges that you've faced so far?
Um, I mean both. Well, to start with, there's economic challenges. We have to raise money to build a factory, right? And that's particularly difficult right this moment because of our company being in total chaos.
Mhm.
Um, we have to, some of the other challenges are, so we know how to make the chemical to put on the cups, but how do you then put it in a factory? Like, who's going to use this? Probably a paper manufacturer that wants to coat their cups, right? And they're already coating their cups with PFAS. So what they'd like is not to change, invest in all new equipment because equipment is expensive, right? So we need to be able to use their equipment and use our chemical in their equipment.
Mhm.
And and there's issues like, is it too sticky? Does it, if it gums up their machines, that's a problem. There's a lot of it starts as a sort of liquid, our coating, and then it gets like you know wiped onto the spread onto the paper by the machines, but it needs to dry fast so that it doesn't get stuck to itself when it goes into production. It needs to dry, it needs not to be sticky, it needs to be produced at a mass scale, it needs to go fast. And we haven't solved all those things. We're not sure. We haven't made that transition between here's a substance that will work and here's how it's going to work in the machines in real life. So that's the sort of technical challenge that we're having. We also haven't tested it for you have to have data on how permeable it is to oxygen, how much like how much water will go through it or will not go through it. You have to have data on all of this for for another company to be interested in buying this.
Mhm.
That's another challenge. And what was the other one you asked? The last one?
The biggest market or just technical challenges?
Oh, I guess those are them. That's the real ones, yeah. The market really wants what we have. So we've talked to lots of big players. We've talked to big companies because everybody wants to get out of PFAS and get into something more sustainable. So I think finally we found a company in Portugal that's they use eucalyptus. They're pretty small. They make paper out of eucalyptus and they're willing to work with us to get this to work. Because bigger companies, like you have 3M, for example, is a huge company, a paper company, like at that scale or international paper, they're not interested in spending the time with every little startup that has an idea.
Mhm.
Even though we know it works, like it might in the end might not work. And they don't have the time to deal with that. So we founded a smaller company in Portugal uh, that are willing to work with us, which is great because that match is key. In the end, it's all about relationships.
Yeah.
It's not just about like a match of ideas or money. It is those things, but in the end, you also want to match like the people get along and you can trust each other. So important.
Mhm. So in the next like 5 to 10 years, is like, would your vision be that like I would go to Starbucks, my coffee cup would have your compound, or would it be like I would go to like some like fancy artisanal place and it would be there? So what?
Oh, that's a good question. Yeah. Um, I'd say I don't know. My guess is the latter, that it's going to be like a niche product. But, it would be great if it were in Starbucks. It's the issue is not how much it costs because actually we can make it cost pennies, like only maybe a penny or a fraction of a penny more than the plastic, the PFAS,
Mhm.
which might be doable, but it's also, is there enough seaweed in the world to coat all the cups that we use and throw away? Not
Yeah.
sure that there is.
So where are you guys currently getting your seaweed from?
We are setting up to get our seaweed from two major places. One is Alaska, but the more important place is South Africa. Yeah, which where I am now heading because because of the tariff situation, we're going to move some of our production to South Africa and do some pre-processing there of the seaweed. Because seaweed, if you can imagine, you can't process seaweed. You have to process it when it's wet and when it's right out of the ocean for it to work well. So being near the source of seaweed is the best way to do it.
Wait, so I can you so like do you guys farm the seaweed? Is it like from the ocean? Like I don't quite know how this works.
Yeah, no, no reason, and you should, or any people don't know about seaweed really. And it's always a combination. So people started farming seaweed maybe a few decades ago. It's not like except in Asia, they've been farming it for quite a while. But the seaweed farming industry is pretty new in the United States. And the
Mm-hmm.
two major places where they farm it are Maine, where I was living just until recently, and then Alaska. And that's because those two places are very cold, have a lot of cold water, and seaweed needs cold. The kind of seaweed that we want grows in cold water, not hot water. It dies if the water's too warm. So another climate issue there, because as the water warms, it's harder and harder to farm the seaweed. So um, that's farmed, and it's pretty expensive because it's farmed, because the farmers have overhead, and there's a lot you have to do to get a farm going, and then the wild harvested seaweed is less expensive. So when you say seaweed, there's all sorts of seaweed in the world. It's like saying plants. You say plant and you think you don't know what to think, because there's small plants, there's big plants, there's green plants, there's red plants. It's the same with seaweed. So the seaweed in South Africa is very special. It's a giant kind of seaweed, a giant kelp. And it grows to be taller than we are underwater. And this particular seaweed, uh, storms come every year and rip up a lot of the older seaweeds, and they're like rolling around on the top of the water, and especially because they're hollow inside, they don't sink. And then the the harvesters come and just collect it from the top of the water, and they're going to just give it to us after. So that's a pretty beneficial, easy, cheap way to do this.
Okay. So let's say that you like overcome that you get to an industrial scale and would you stop at the coding or the other industries you think you could integrate into?
I mean, I've spent about 5 years on this, and we've gone through all the possible use cases. And this is, we're pretty much like, you can do a lot of different things with seaweed, and this is probably what we're going to focus on. So the other uses, the cosmetics and the food, that's taking a huge amount of our time right now to get going. So the coatings are more an R&D, research and development, um, project. And yeah, there just isn't enough time to do a lot more. And there's all sorts of different kinds of coatings, of course. We might move into a different kind of coating.
So how did you get interested in this area for the first time?
Um, I started 5 years ago. I was actually working for UIC, right? That and when I was at UIC, I was working in academic administration, like your dad, uh, and in a completely different field. And I never thought about seaweed at all. But
Mhm.
then I took an airplane once to I was doing a job for UIC, and I happened to, how chance can sometimes bring you
Mhm.
into contact with people you never thought you would. I was seated next to a guy who was a seaweed expert. And in a few months, well, few years, he became my husband, and then he also became my business partner, and we started a business together in seaweed. He's been in the seaweed industry for like 30 years. And
Mhm.
he is an engineer and an MBA, and he is, he fell into it. He didn't study to be a seaweed engineer, but that was the job available, and he became fascinated by it. And it's taken him all over the world. He's helped with seaweed farms in Ireland, and he's gone to Malaysia to help people build factories for biorefining seaweed, and he's been to China and all over the world. So it's been kind of an interesting life for him.
Mhm. So other than getting rid of forever chem PFAS, are there any
Yeah.
other climate benefits of seaweed, like the farming process or
Well, okay, so I told you I wanted to talk to you about greenwashing, right?
Mhm.
There's a lot of information out there that is questionable. Like people have made a lot of claims about seaweed and climate. If you Google seaweed climate, you will find people talking about um, carbon sequestration,
Mhm.
and you will find people talking about how sinking seaweed might or growing seaweed might solve the world's climate problems.
Mhm.
And I'm not really a subscriber to that. Seaweed does mitigate local ecosystems. Like if there's a small pool and there's seaweed growing, just like a tree or another plant on land would absorb carbon and nitrogen and those kind of things. The seaweed does the same, and it does it very well. So maybe you could clean up some areas with seaweed, and you could say, and people have applied for money and received it on the basis of saying that the fact that they're working in seaweed helps climate because it's encouraging people to grow and farm seaweed because of carbon sequestration.
Okay.
But if you were interested in looking at a case, a really interesting case of greenwashing, look for Running Tide. It's a company. It they maybe 10 years ago or 5 years ago, they raised $50 million. $50 million. And their project was seaweed sinking. They were going to take a whole bunch of seaweed and throw it into the bottom of the ocean. And they were going to sell carbon credits to other companies. You know about carbon credits, that whole thing? They were going to sell it, and Shopify and all these big name and airlines bought into it because they wanted to offset their pollution. And I'm not somebody who believes in carbon offset, uh, not to the extreme way that they were talking about, because it had a scammy kind of, uh, I don't want to say anything now. I'm self-conscious because I'm I'm gonna be on the web forever. But if they promised a lot and their company went bankrupt, and you should look into it because they weren't able to sink the seaweed. They ended up sinking wood chips instead. So if you can imagine, they took all these wood chips all the way from Canada to Iceland and threw them into the ocean. And then they charged companies for that, for part of the expenses for what they did. That
Yeah.
seems questionable to me.
So after that was like that happened, did you like notice in your company that there's like like bad stigma around seaweed after that, or is it like not noticeable?
I was afraid of that, especially because when that happened, I was raising money. We were raising money for a company and we were having trouble raising money anyway, but we were very afraid. Yeah. Um, I think it must have affected some investors and it must have given something of a bad name to carbon sequestration and carbon offset using seaweed. You don't hear about companies starting wanting to do that these days.
Hmm.
So maybe it did. Yeah, I think it did. Definitely. Yeah. The PR around what we do is so important.
Hmm.
It can make or break the company.
Well, thank you.
Yeah. What are you gonna